Mafia boss watched her dance in the rival's club, knowing every step was a trap set for him. The rain in this city did not wash things clean. It only slicked the streets with a layer of grime and made the neon signs bleed across the asphalt like fresh watercolor paint. Luca Carvelli stepped out of his armored sedan, the sole of his Italian leather shoe striking the pavement with a heavy, deliberate thud. He paused for a moment, adjusting the cuffs of his suit jacket, ignoring the cold mist that clung to the salt air. He was a man of his mid-30s, though the lines around his eyes suggested a soul that had weathered a century of storms. He was built broad and solid, a wall of muscle concealed beneath tailored charcoal wool. Tonight, he was walking into the belly of the beast, Inferno. The name blazed in red script above the heavy iron doors. It was the crown jewel of the waterfront district, a sprawling monument to vice and excess owned by Victor Morello. Victor was a rival, a man whose ambition outpaced his intelligence, but who had recently survived a police raid with suspicious ease. That survival had made Luca curious. In their world, survival usually costs something: loyalty, territory, or blood. Luca was here to negotiate a minor dispute over shipping lanes, or at least that was the official reason. The truth was that he had come to look Victor in the eye and smell the fear on him. He wanted to see where the cracks in the foundation were before he brought the whole house down. The bouncers at the door recognized him instantly. They stiffened, their hands drifting instinctively toward their waistbands before thinking better of it. They stepped aside, opening the velvet rope without a word. Luca walked through, his expression impassive, his dark eyes scanning the perimeter, noting the exits, the camera angles, and the placement of the security staff inside. The club was a sensory assault. The bass thrummed deep in the chest, a heartbeat amplified to a deafening roar. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, stale smoke, and the metallic tang of chilled vodka. Bodies moved in a rhythmic, sweaty mass on the lower dance floor, bathed in strobing lights of violet and crimson. Luca moved through the crowd like a shark parting a school of fish. He did not push. People simply moved out of his way, sensing the dangerous gravity he carried. He made his way to a reserved VIP table near the edge of the raised stage, a position that offered a view of the entire room while keeping his back to a solid wall. He sat, buttoning his jacket, his hands resting calmly on the white tablecloth. A waitress appeared within seconds, breathless and nervous, placing a tumbler of amber whiskey before him. He nodded once, dismissing her. He took a sip, the alcohol burning pleasantly, and watched. He was looking for Victor. But instead, the lights in the club dimmed. The chaotic strobes died down, replaced by a single, focused spotlight that cut through the haze and centered on the stage. The music shifted. The heavy, aggressive bass faded into a slow, grinding rhythm, sultry and dark. A hush fell over the nearest tables. Then, she stepped into the light. Luca felt the air leave his lungs. It was not a gasp, but a sudden, violent cessation of breath, as if someone had struck him in the solar plexus. Elena. It had been 4 years. 4 years since she had walked out of his apartment in the middle of the night, leaving nothing but a cold side of the bed and a silence that had haunted him ever since. He had looked for her. God knew he had looked for her. He had turned over half the state, terrified that his enemies had taken her, only to eventually accept the bitter truth that she had simply chosen to leave him. He had convinced himself she was in Europe, or perhaps out west, living a quiet life far away from the blood and the noise of his world. He never expected to find her here, in the center of Victor Morello's empire. Elena Maris stood in the spotlight, frozen for a beat of the music. She was wearing a costume of dark red sequins that shimmered like fresh blood under the lights. It was cut high on her hips and low across her chest, leaving little to the imagination yet concealing just enough to madden the mind. Her dark hair cascaded in loose waves down her back, and her skin glowed with a sheen of perspiration. She began to move. It was not the frantic, energetic dancing of the girls on the lower floor. This was slow. It was deliberate. She extended one arm, her fingers trailing through the air as if pulling a heavy rope. Her hips swayed with a liquid grace, a motion that seemed to start at the floor and roll up through her spine. She turned, her eyes sweeping the crowd, vacant and professional, until they snagged on him. For a fraction of a second, her mask slipped. Luca saw her eyes widen, the dark irises flaring with genuine shock. Her step faltered, just a microscopic hesitation that no one else would have noticed. But Luca noticed. He saw the way her chest tightened, the way her breath hitched. Then, the mask was back. She looked away, turning her back to him, dipping low in a move that emphasized the curve of her waist. But the air between them had changed. It was charged now, electric and volatile. Up on the mezzanine level, concealed within the shadows of a private balcony, Victor Morello swirled a glass of wine and watched the scene below. He was a thin man with a sharp, weasel-like face and a penchant for silk shirts that cost more than most people earned in a year. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the railing. A slow, thin smile spread across his lips. He watched Luca's stillness. He watched the white-knuckle grip Luca had on his whiskey glass. "The hook is baited," Victor said softly, his voice barely audible over the music. His right-hand man, a brute named Marco, grunted in agreement. Victor swirled his wine again. He knew the history. Information was the most valuable currency in their trade, and Victor had spent a fortune digging up the ghosts of Luca Carvelli's past. Finding Elena had been a stroke of luck. Breaking her into compliance had been a matter of leverage. Down on the stage, Elena finished her set. She spun one last time, the red sequins catching the light in a blinding flare, and dropped into a final pose, her chest heaving, her head bowed. The club erupted in applause and whistles. She stood quickly, not acknowledging the crowd, and disappeared behind the heavy velvet curtains at the rear of the stage. Luca remained seated. He did not clap. He did not drink. He simply stared at the space where she had been, his mind racing, calculating, dissecting the impossibility of what he had just seen. Behind the curtain, the glamour evaporated. The backstage area was a narrow corridor of concrete and exposed pipes, smelling of hairspray and damp mop water. Elena grabbed a silk robe from a hook and wrapped it tightly around herself, her hands shaking so hard she could barely tie the sash. She needed to leave. She needed to run. Seeing him there, sitting like a king in the midst of this hell, had nearly broken her knees. He looked the same, perhaps harder, his jaw more set, but the intensity of his gaze was exactly as she remembered. It burned. "Get to the office," a voice growled. One of Victor's guards was standing by the dressing room door. He didn't wait for her to agree. He simply jerked his head toward the stairs that led up to the management suite. Elena swallowed the bile rising in her throat. She tightened the robe and walked, her legs feeling heavy and numb. Victor's office was soundproofed, a sudden jarring silence after the roar of the club. It was decorated in aggressive luxury, black leather, chrome, and modern art that looked like violent splashes of paint. Victor sat behind his desk, looking entirely too pleased with himself. "You did well," Victor said, gesturing for her to stand in front of the desk. He did not offer her a chair, but he saw you. I saw him see you. The reaction was perfect. "I cannot do this," Elena whispered, her voice trembling. "Not him. Anyone else. Victor, please." Victor sighed, an exaggerated sound of disappointment. He opened the top drawer of his desk and pulled out a manila envelope. He tossed it onto the glass surface. It slid across and stopped inches from her hand. "We have a deal, Elena. You work off your father's debt. You do what I say. And in exchange, I ensure your family remains intact." "I am paying the debt," Elena argued, her nails digging into her palms. "I dance every night. I give you everything I earn. Interest is a terrible thing," Victor said lightly, "but this is not about money anymore. This is about opportunity." He reached out and flipped the envelope open. A single photograph spilled out. Elena flinched as if she had been struck. The photo showed a young man, barely 20, tied to a chair in a dim, windowless room. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, blood trickling from a cut on his lip. But he was alive. His eyes were wide with terror. Javier, her little brother, the only family she had left. Victor stood up and walked around the desk. He moved into her personal space, smelling of peppermint and rot. He reached out and gripped her chin, his fingers digging into her skin, forcing her to look at the photo. "He is a tough kid," Victor said softly, "but everyone breaks eventually." "Let him go," Elena hissed, tears stinging her eyes. "I will," Victor promised. "Tonight. If you do your job." He released her chin and stepped back, wiping his hand on his pants as if she were the dirty one. "The plan is simple. You go back out there, you approach Carvelli, you offer him a private dance. He will not say no. You get him comfortable. You get him to trust you. Then, you lead him to the platinum room in the back." Elena went cold. The platinum room was isolated, soundproofed, and tonight she knew it would be a kill box. "You want me to lead him to his death," she said dully. "I want you to lead him to a negotiation," Victor corrected with a smirk. "The room is wired, cameras, microphones, and yes, a few of my men behind the mirrors just in case things get out of hand. I want him compromised. I want him on tape admitting to things that will send him to prison for the rest of his life. Or I want him dead if he refuses to bow. It is his choice." "And if I refuse?" Victor nodded at the photograph on the desk. "Then Javier stops being a guest and starts being an example." Elena stared at the image of her brother. She remembered holding his hand when he was small, promising him that she would always protect him. She remembered the day their parents died, how she had sworn that nothing would ever hurt him again. She looked up at Victor. The hatred she felt was a physical weight in her chest, a hot, dense stone, but beneath the hate was a terrifying clarity. She had no leverage. She had no power. "I will do it," she said, her voice sounding hollow, like it belonged to someone else. "Good girl." Victor smiled. "Now fix your face. You look like a funeral. Go make him fall in love with you all over again." Elena turned and walked out of the office. She went to the dressing room, checked her reflection in the mirror, and wiped the dampness from beneath her eyes. She applied fresh lipstick, a shade as red as a wound. She took a deep breath, forcing her trembling hands to still. She was walking into a moral trap, a labyrinth from which there was no escape. To save her brother, she had to destroy the only man she had ever loved. When she returned to the floor, the club felt different. The noise seemed distant, muffled by the rushing of blood in her ears. She navigated the tables, her eyes locked on the VIP section. Luca was still there. He had not moved. As she approached, he watched her. His face was unreadable, a mask of stone, but his eyes were alive, tracking her every movement. Elena stopped at the edge of his table. She forced a smile onto her lips, a seductive tilt to her head that she had practiced 1,000 times in the mirror. "Hello? Luca," she said. The sound of his name on her tongue felt like a transgression. Luca looked at her for a long moment. He did not smile. He did not blink. "Elena," he said. His voice was deep, a rumble that vibrated in her chest. It was the voice that used to whisper to her in the dark, the voice that had promised her the world before she had run away from it. She gestured to the empty chair across from him. "May I?" Luca waved a hand, a permissive gesture. She sat, careful to cross her legs elegantly, keeping her posture upright and inviting. "I thought you were dead," Luca said. He did not waste time with pleasantries. "I needed to disappear." Elena lied, the rehearsed words tasting like ash. "This city, it consumes people. Luca, I needed to find myself." "And you found yourself here?" Luca asked, his gaze sweeping over the gaudy club, the flashing lights, the drunken patrons. "In Victor Morello's pocket? I work here." "Luca, that is all. It is a job. You used to be a teacher," Luca reminded her. "You used to hate places like this." "People change," she said softly. "Circumstances change." Luca leaned forward. The movement was slight, but it felt aggressive. "Why are you here, Elena?" "At my table. I saw you," she said, dropping her voice to a whisper, leaning in so that her scent, jasmine and vanilla, would reach him. "I could not let you leave without saying hello. Is that all? Just hello?" "Maybe I missed you," she ventured, letting her eyes drop to his mouth before flicking back up to his gaze. Luca's expression softened. It was microscopic. A slight relaxation of the tension around his mouth, a dimming of the hard light in his eyes. He looked, for a fleeting second, like the man who had once held her while she cried over a bad dream. "I never stopped looking for you," he admitted quietly. The confession hit her hard. She felt a crack form in her composure. She wanted to scream at him to run. She wanted to tell him that there were cameras watching, that Victor was upstairs laughing, that her brother was bleeding in a basement somewhere. But she couldn't. "If you missed me," she said, her voice husky, "let me show you. Let me give you a private dance, for old time's sake." Luca studied her. He looked at her hands, which were resting on the tablecloth. He looked at the pulse beating frantically in the hollow of her throat. "Where?" he asked. "The platinum room." She said, "It is quiet there. Private." Luca hesitated. He looked toward the back of the club, toward the shadowed corridor she had indicated. Then he looked back at her. "Led the way," he said. They rose together. Elena walked ahead, conscious of his eyes on her back. She led him away from the main floor, down a hallway lined with velvet wallpaper, to a row of private booths. She stopped at the one Victor had specified, punched a code into the keypad, and the door clicked open. Inside. The room was small and intimate, lit by recessed red lighting. There was a plush leather love seat and a small table. A slow, rhythmic beat pumped through hidden speakers. Elena gestured for him to sit. Luca obliged, sinking into the leather, spreading his arms along the back of the seat. He took up so much space. The room suddenly felt very small. Elena moved to the small open space in front of him. She began to move to the music, but her heart was not in the dance. Her mind was screaming. She stepped closer to him, closing the distance until she was standing between his spread knees. She did not touch him, not yet. She let her hands hover over his shoulders, tracing the line of his suit jacket without making contact. She leaned forward, her face inches from his, her hair falling like a curtain around them. "You look good, Luca," she whispered. She sat next to him on the small sofa, breaking the dance to create a false sense of intimacy. She sat just out of reach, her knees almost brushing his thigh. She used every trick she knew. She trailed her fingers over the table, drawing invisible shapes near his hand. She leaned forward, parting her lips, letting her breath hitch as if overcome by his presence. Inside, she was being torn apart. Every instinct screamed at her to touch him, to grab his hand and feel the safety she had abandoned years ago. But the hatred for his world, the world that had now ensnared her brother, warred with the ache of old love. Luca sat very still. He watched her hand moving on the table. He watched the way her chest rose and fell too quickly. He could smell the fear on her. It was not the nervous excitement of a lover reunited. It was the sharp, metallic scent of terror. He looked into her eyes. Beneath the heavy lashes and the practiced seduction, he saw it. A flicker of panic, a desperate plea that she was trying to bury under layers of makeup and performance. She was trembling. It was slight, a vibration in her fingertips, but it was there. "Elena." Luca said. She froze. "Yes?" He reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm and rough. He turned her hand over, exposing her palm, and traced the lifeline there with his thumb. "You are shaking," he stated. "I am nervous," she breathed. "It has been a long time." "No," Luca said, shaking his head slowly. "This is not nerves." He looked around the room. He looked at the mirror on the wall, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the angle. He looked at the smoke detector that blinked with a rhythmic red light. Then he looked back at her. The softness was gone from his face, replaced by the guarded mask of the dawn. "Something is wrong," he said. "Luca, please." She started, leaning in, trying to salvage the moment, trying to force the trap to snap shut. He stood up abruptly. The movement was so sudden that Elena recoiled. "Not tonight," he said firmly. He adjusted his jacket, his demeanor shifting instantly from lover to soldier. "Luca." "Wait," Elena pleaded, standing up. "If he left now, Victor would punish her. Javier would pay the price. You cannot just leave." "I can," Luca said. "And I am," He looked at her one last time. There was no anger in his eyes, only a deep, unsettling curiosity and a trace of sadness. "Either you are playing me, Elena," he said quietly, "or you are in trouble." He did not wait for an answer. He turned and walked out of the door, his footsteps heavy and final in the hallway. Elena sank back onto the leather sofa, burying her face in her hands. She listened to him walk away, the sound of his departure echoing like a gavel striking a sounding block. She had failed. Outside. The cool night air hit Luca like a slap. He walked briskly to his waiting car. His driver, a stoic man named Dante, opened the rear door, back to the penthouse. "Boss?" Dante asked as Luca slid into the leather seat. Luca stared out the tinted window at the neon sign of the Inferno, the red light reflected in his eyes, burning there. "No," Luca said. "Take us back to the office." "And Dante?" "Yes, boss. I want eyes on this place. 24/7. I want to know who comes in, who goes out, and who delivers the milk in the morning. Understood. And find out everything you can about Elena Maris for the last 4 years, Luca added, his voice dropping an octave. Dig deep. Someone has a leash on her, and I want to know who is holding the handle." The car pulled away from the curb, disappearing into the rainy night, leaving the club and its secrets behind, but Luca knew he would be back. He had walked into a trap. He was certain of it. But for Elena, he would walk into fire itself. 3 days of silence had settled over the city, a heavy, humid blanket that made the air feel thick enough to choke on. For Luca Carvelli, silence was rarely peaceful. It was usually the deep breath before the gunshot. He had spent those 72 hours staring at surveillance photos, grainy black and white images of Elena entering and leaving the Inferno, always flanked by shadows that looked too heavy to be simple escorts. He sat in the back of his car, the engine idling a block away from the club. The neon sign of the Inferno reflected in the wet asphalt, a smear of red that looked like a fresh wound on the street. "Stay here," Luca ordered, his voice low and absolute. His head of security, a man named Dante who was built like a vending machine and had half the sense of humor, turned in the driver's seat. "Boss, going in alone is a mistake. Victor is not known for his hospitality." "I am not going for the hospitality," Luca replied, checking the magazine of the pistol tucked into the waistband of his trousers beneath his jacket. "I am going to see what he does when I hand him a loaded gun. If I bring you, he puts his guard up. If I go alone, he gets arrogant. Arrogant men make mistakes." "We will be 30 seconds away," Dante said, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "Give me an hour. If I am not out, burn the place down." Luca stepped out of the car and buttoned his jacket. He walked toward the club, his stride measured, his heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against his ribs. He was walking into enemy territory, deliberately placing his head in the lion's mouth to see if the jaws would snap shut. But more than that, he was going back for her. He needed to know if the fear he had seen in Elena's eyes was real or just another part of the performance. Inside the Inferno, the atmosphere was coiled tight. The air smelled of expensive cologne and cheap desperation. Victor Morello's men were everywhere, trying to look casual but failing. They stood near the pillars and the exits, their hands hovering near their waistbands, their eyes tracking every movement in the room. Backstage, in the cramped dressing room that smelled of hairspray and fear, Elena was trying to stop her hands from shaking. Victor stood in the doorway, blocking the only exit. He was smiling, but it was a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You are stalling," Victor said, checking his gold watch. "I am preparing," Elena replied, forcing her voice to remain steady as she adjusted the strap of her heel. "You are stalling," Victor repeated, stepping into the room. The space suddenly felt very small. "He moves tonight." "Elena, I do not care how you do it. Cry, beg, seduce him. It makes no difference to me. But you get him into the back corridor before the hour is up. He's cautious. Victor, if I push too hard, he will run, then run faster," Victor snapped, his face darkening. "Remember who is waiting for you to succeed. Javier asked about you today. He wanted to know when his big sister was coming to get him. It would be a shame if I had to tell him you failed him." Elena felt a cold spike of nausea in her stomach. "Do not touch him. Get Carvelli to the corridor," Victor said, backing out of the room. "Or I will send you your brother's finger as a reminder of what failure costs." He slammed the door. Elena stood frozen for a moment, staring at her reflection in the lighted mirror. Her skin was pale beneath the stage makeup. She looked like a ghost dressed in silk. She closed her eyes, took a ragged breath, and whispered a prayer she didn't believe anyone was listening to. Then she turned and walked toward the stage. When Luca entered the main room, the change in the atmosphere was instantaneous. Heads turned, whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through dry grass. The Carvelli Don was here, alone, in Morello territory. It was a statement, it was a challenge. He ignored them all. He walked to the same table he had occupied 3 nights ago, sitting with his back to the wall. He did not order a drink, he simply watched the stage. The lights dimmed, the music started. A slow, mournful jazz track that sounded like a weeping saxophone. Elena stepped out. She was wearing silver tonight, a fluid, shimmering fabric that clung to her body like a second skin. She moved into the spotlight, and for a moment she just stood there, letting the music wash over her. Then she began to dance. It was different from the last time. The aggression was gone, replaced by something slower, more intimate. She moved with a heartbreaking fluidity, her body rolling to the rhythm in a way that felt private, as if she were dancing in her own bedroom and the crowd was merely voyeurs peeping through the keyhole. She found Luca in the darkness, her eyes locked onto his. She did not look away. She danced for him, and him alone. She extended a hand toward him, palm open, fingers curling in a beckoning gesture. Her hips swayed, a hypnotic pendulum, but her face was open, vulnerable. Luca watched her, his expression impassive, but his mind was racing. He saw the practiced seduction, the tilt of her head, the arch of her back that was designed to drive a man insane. But he also saw the tremble in her hands when she reached up to touch her hair. He saw the way her throat worked as she swallowed. She looked like someone standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the wind to push her over. Was she luring him into a trap, or was she silently begging him to save her? The uncertainty gnawed at him. He wanted to hate her. He wanted to dismiss her as a traitor who had sold him out to his enemy. But every time their eyes met, he felt that old, familiar pull, a magnetic force that defied all logic and safety. When the set ended, the applause was thunderous, but Elena did not bow. She kept her eyes on Luca for 1 second longer than necessary, then turned and vanished. 10 minutes later, a waiter approached Luca's table. "Miss Maris would like to invite you to join her in the Emerald Lounge," the waiter said, his voice nervous. Luca stood up without a word. He followed the waiter away from the main floor, but his senses were on high alert. He checked the corners, the shadows, the reflection in the glass panels. He was walking into the web, but he was a spider too. The Emerald Lounge was a smaller, semi-private area off the main bar. It was dimly lit, the walls lined with dark green velvet that absorbed the sound. Elena was sitting on a plush sofa, her legs crossed, a glass of water untouched on the table before her. Luca sat next to her. He did not sit opposite her this time. He sat close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin, close enough to smell the jasmine perfume that had haunted his memory for 4 years. Their knees were inches apart, the space between them charged with static electricity. "You came back," Elena said softly. She did not look at him. She looked at her hands. "I had unfinished business," Luca replied. His voice was rougher than he intended. "With Victor or with me?" Luca turned his head to study her profile. She looked tired. Up close, the makeup couldn't hide the shadows beneath her eyes. "Why did you run, Elena?" he asked. "No more lies about finding yourself. Tell me the truth." Elena stiffened. She picked at the hem of her silver dress, her fingers twisting the fabric into a tight knot. "I told you, Luca, I needed to survive. This life. Your life. It was suffocating me. I had to get out before it crushed me." Luca watched her fingers. She was knotting the fabric so tightly her knuckles were white. It was a nervous tic she had always had. She used to do it when she was hiding something, usually something small, like buying an expensive dress she couldn't afford or breaking a dish. "And your brother?" Luca asked, watching her reaction carefully. "Javier. He must be a man by now." "Where is he?" Elena's breath hitched. A tiny, fractured sound escaped her throat. "Javier is fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. "He's away at school. He's safe." She was lying. Luca knew it with the certainty of gravity. Her voice had cracked on the word safe. "You are lying to me," Luca said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Elena turned to him then, her eyes wide and wet. "Please, Luca, do not ask me about him. Just be here with me. Right now. That is all that matters." She was deflecting. She was terrified. His suspicion deepened, turning into a dark certainty that she was in trouble far deeper than he had realized. The music in the lounge changed. The speakers overhead began to play an old ballad, a slow, aching song about lost time. "Dance with me," Luca said abruptly. He stood up and offered his hand. It was a command as much as an invitation. Elena hesitated. She looked at his hand, broad, scarred, capable of violence and tenderness in equal measure. She knew she should say no. She knew she should lead him to the corridor right now. Victor was watching. The clock was ticking. But she wanted this. God help her. She wanted one moment of peace before the world fell apart. She placed her hand in his. Her skin was cold. His was burning hot. He pulled her up and guided her into the corner of the small room, away from the few other patrons. He pulled her close, eliminating the distance between them. Her palm pressed flat against his chest, right over his heart. She could feel the steady, powerful thud of it, a rhythm that felt like the only solid thing in her shifting world. Luca placed his hand on the small of her back, his fingers spreading wide, claiming her. They began to move in small, tight circles. For a moment, the club disappeared. Victor disappeared. The gun in Luca's waistband and the threat to Javier's life faded into the background. There was only the heat of his body, the scent of him, leather and rain, and the strength of his arm holding her up. Elena rested her forehead near his shoulder, closing her eyes. She let herself remember what safety felt like. It felt like this. It felt like him, before the debts, before Victor, before the fear. There had been Luca. And despite everything, despite the danger he represented, he was the only place she had ever felt truly protected. She drifted in the memory, her body molding to his. Luca tightened his grip slightly, pulling her even closer, until there was not even a breath of air between them. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling deeply. "Tell me who is hurting you," he whispered against her ear, "and I will kill them." The promise was so simple, so absolute that it nearly broke her. She wanted to tell him, she wanted to scream Victor's name, but the image of Javier's beaten face flashed in her mind. Victor had eyes everywhere. If she spoke, Javier died. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him. Luca stopped moving. He looked down at her, his expression raw. He lifted his hand from her back and cupped her face, his fingers gentle on her jaw. He used 2 fingers to tilt her chin up. Their faces hovered a breath apart. She could feel his exhale on her lips. He brushed his thumb across her lower lip, a slow, reverent touch that sent a shiver straight down her spine. Her breath caught audibly. He was going to kiss her, and if he kissed her, she would be lost. She would never be able to betray him, and Javier would die. The thought crashed into her like a bucket of ice water. She jerked back, pulling her face away from his hand. "No," she whispered, panic rising in her chest. We cannot, not here." Luca let his hand drop, but his gaze remained intense. "Why? It is too crowded," she said, grasping at the script Victor had given her. "Too many eyes. I want to be alone with you, Luca. Truly alone." Luca watched her. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by that frantic, brittle energy. "Where?" "There is a corridor in the back," she said, her voice trembling. "It is private. No cameras, no people. Just us." She took his hand and tugged. "Come with me, please." She was leading him to the slaughter. She felt sick, physically ill. As she pulled him toward the door that led to the service hallway, Luca followed her. He let her lead him out of the lounge and toward the rear of the club, but as they walked, the soldier in him took over. He stopped feeling the ghost of her kiss and started seeing the angles of the room. They reached the entrance to the VIP corridor. It was a narrow hallway, dimly lit. "After you," Luca said. Elena stepped in, but she stopped and turned back to him, reaching for his hand to pull him across the threshold. Luca took a step forward. Then he stopped. His instincts, honed by years of surviving assassination attempts and betrayals, screamed at him. He looked up. In the corner of the ceiling, a security camera that should have been sweeping the hallway was fixed in a static position, pointed directly at the spot where he would be standing. He looked down. The door to the first room on the left was cracked open less than an inch. It was dark inside, but a beam of light from the hallway caught something metal, the matte black barrel of a silencer. It was a kill box. Elena was still holding his hand, tugging gently. "Luca, come on." She didn't know, or maybe she did. It didn't matter. If he stepped into that hallway, he was a dead man. Luca reacted with the speed of a striking cobra. He did not draw his weapon. Instead, he yanked Elena toward him, spinning her around so her back was against his chest. He laughed, a low, rich sound that echoed in the quiet space, masking the violence of the movement. "No," he said loudly, spinning her away from the corridor and back toward the main room. Elena stumbled, confused. "Luca? I do not like the feng shui back there," Luca said, his voice bright and amused, though his eyes were cold as ice as he scanned the shadows. "It smells like stale smoke and bad decisions. Let us go back to the bar. I want to buy you a drink." He kept his arm around her waist, a grip that was possessive and unyielding. He walked her briskly away from the corridor, placing his body between her and the door with the gun. He was shielding her, even as he realized she had just tried to lead him to his death. Elena was breathless, struggling to keep up with his long strides. "What are you doing?" Victor can wait," Luca said. "I have seen enough for one night." He walked her right up to the edge of the stage. He leaned in, brushing a kiss against her cheek. It was not romantic. It was a warning. "Tell your boss his hospitality needs work," Luca whispered. Then he turned and walked away, moving through the crowd toward the exit without looking back. Elena stood there, trembling, watching him leave. She had failed. Again. 20 minutes later, the club was closing. The patrons were ushered out. The music died. Elena was summoned to the office. She walked in, her legs feeling like lead. Victor was waiting. He did not speak. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed her upper arm. His fingers dug into her flesh, hard enough to bruise instantly. "You had him!" Victor screamed, spit flying from his lips. He was right there. He saw something. Elena gasped, trying to pull away, but his grip was like iron. "He's not stupid. Victor, he sensed the trap." "You are useless," Victor shouted, shaking her. "I gave you one job, one simple job. I need more time," Elena cried out. "He trusts me, but he does not trust this place. If you push him too fast, he will never come back. You need him to come back, do you not?" Victor stopped shaking her. He shoved her away. She stumbled and fell against the leather sofa. Victor glared down at her, his chest heaving. "You are testing my patience." "Elena, I can do it," she promised, rubbing her throbbing arm. "But it has to be on his terms. If he feels trapped, he fights. You know that." Victor straightened his silk tie. He walked back to his desk and sat down. He picked up the photo of Javier again. "You are right," Victor said coldly. "He's a careful man, but my patience has limits, and so does your brother's luck." And he looked at her, his eyes flat and dead. "Next time, there are no excuses. If you fail again, you will not just get a picture of Javier. I will bring him here, and I will let you watch what happens when you disappoint me." Elena swallowed the scream that was building in her throat. "I understand. Get out of my sight," Victor said. Elena fled the office. She ran down the stairs, past the empty stage, and out the back exit into the alleyway. The rain had started again. She leaned against the brick wall, sliding down until she hit the wet pavement. She buried her face in her knees and wept, the sound lost in the steady drumming of the rain. She was trapped between a monster and the only man she had ever loved, and the walls were closing in fast. The Ember Room was everything the Inferno was not. Where Victor Morello's club was a chaotic assault of neon and noise, Luca Carvelli's sanctuary was a study in shadows and burnished mahogany. The air here smelled of aged oak and expensive tobacco. Not sweat and desperation, it was a fortress disguised as a lounge. And tonight, the shutters were drawn, the main doors were locked, and the only light came from the low-hanging brass lamps above the central table in the private library. Luca stood at the head of the table, his hands pressed flat against a sprawling schematic of the Inferno. Beside him, Dante and 2 other lieutenants, grim-faced men who had served the Carvelli family for 20 years, studied the grainy black-and-white surveillance photos scattered across the wood. "It is a kill box," Dante said, his voice low and devoid of emotion. He pointed a thick finger at a section of the blueprint marked with red ink. "Look at the angles here. The hallway leading to the Platinum Room. They moved the cameras yesterday. See this blind spot? That is not an accident. That is where they stack the shooters." Luca leaned in closer, his dark eyes tracing the lines of the enemy territory. He had felt it in his bones the other night. The prickling sensation on the back of his neck that signaled a predator was near. Now, the proof was staring him in the face. Victor was not just trying to record a compromise. He was building an execution chamber. "We have confirmation on the personnel shift," another lieutenant added, sliding a photo across the table. It showed 3 men smoking outside the rear delivery entrance of the Inferno. They are not local. They are contractors from out of state. Shooters. Victor is bringing in heavy hands because he does not trust his own crew to pull the trigger on you. Luca stared at the photo. He knew this game. He knew the moves and the counter-moves. Victor was escalating. He was getting impatient. "He wants me to walk down that hallway," Luca said quietly. "He thinks I am blinded by nostalgia. He thinks I am too distracted by the girl to see the gun in his hand. We stop going," Dante stated, crossing his arms. "We burn the place to the ground tonight. We take Victor out in the street." "No," Luca said immediately. The room went silent. Dante frowned. "Boss, it is a trap. You said it yourself. It is a trap." Luca agreed, straightening up and adjusting his cufflinks. "But it is also a map. If we burn it down, Victor goes underground. He hides. We lose the trail of his network. But if I keep walking in, if I keep playing the part of the lovesick fool, then Victor gets arrogant. He keeps adding pieces to the board until he exposes his entire hand. It is too dangerous," Dante argued. "I need to know why." Luca cut in, his voice hardening. He did not need to specify what he meant. His men knew. They knew about Elena. They knew she was the ghost that had haunted their boss for 4 years, the one unanswered question in a life built on absolute certainties. "She is working for him," Luca said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "But she tried to stop me from entering that hallway. She pulled me back. That means she is not a willing participant. Victor has something on her. I need to know what it is. We can grab her," Dante suggested. "Snatch her off the street. Bring her here. You can ask her yourself in safety. If we touch her, Victor might panic," Luca said, shaking his head. "If he has leverage, he will use it. If I pull her out before I know what holds her there, I might be signing her death warrant, or someone else's." He looked down at the blueprints one last time, memorizing the new camera angles, the hidden doors, the potential ambush points. "We play the game." Luca decided, "I go back tonight, but I do not go back blind. I want a team on the roof of the building opposite the Inferno. I want listening devices in the alley, and I want to know every time Victor Morello blinks." Dante sighed, but he nodded. Understood. "And the girl?" Luca's expression softened, just for a fraction of a second before the iron mask slammed back down. "I will handle the girl. 5 miles away." The air was not scented with mahogany or tobacco. It smelled of boiled cabbage and damp plaster. The apartment complex was a crumbling brick tenement on the edge of the industrial district, a place where people lived when they had run out of other options. Elena Maris walked up the 4 flights of stairs, her legs burning. She paused on the landing, checking the hallway. 2 men were leaning against the wall outside apartment 4B. They wore cheap leather jackets and expressions of profound boredom. They were Victor's eyes, his leash, ensuring that his leverage did not decide to run. They watched her approach, neither of them moving to let her pass until she was inches away. One of them smirked, blowing a cloud of cigarette smoke in her direction. "Late today, princess," he sneered. Elena ignored him. She unlocked the door with trembling fingers and slipped inside, locking it quickly behind her as if the deadbolt could keep out the darkness that surrounded them. "Javier," she called out softly. The apartment was small, just 2 rooms with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that clanked like a dying engine. Javier was sitting on the sagging couch, staring at a small television with the volume turned down low. He looked up as she entered, and the relief that washed over his face broke her heart. "Elena," he breathed, standing up. He was 22, but in this light, with the bruises fading to a sickly yellow on his cheekbone, he looked 12. He looked like the little boy she had carried out of their burning childhood home, the boy she had sworn to protect. She crossed the room and pulled him into a hug. He felt thin, too thin. "Are you okay?" she asked, pulling back to inspect his face. Did they come inside?" "No," Javier said, shaking his head. "They just knock on the door every hour, to remind me they are there." Elena led him back to the couch. She sat beside him, gripping his hands. Her own hands were ice cold, but she forced a smile, the same way she forced her steps on the stage at the Inferno. "It is almost over. Javi," she lied, "I promise. I'm going to fix this. You just need to hold on a little longer." Javier looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers. He was young, but he was not stupid. He saw the tension in her jaw, the way her eyes darted toward the window where the guards stood outside. "What are you doing, Elena?" he asked quietly. "What does Victor want you to do?" "Nothing you need to worry about," she said, smoothing his hair back. "It is just business." "Debts, I am working it off." "You are not just dancing," Javier said, his voice rising slightly. "I hear them talking through the door." "They talk about Carvelli. They talk about a setup." Elena flinched. "Hush," she whispered. "Do not say that name." Javier pulled his hands away. "You are involved with him again, with Luca." Elena looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "It is complicated. He is dangerous. Elena, but he is not. He is not Victor." "I know what he is," Elena snapped, the stress fraying her temper. "He is a mob boss. Javier, just like the rest of them. He loved you," Javier said. The words hung in the stale air of the apartment. Elena felt the tears welling up, hot and fast. She tried to blink them back, but she was so tired. She was so incredibly tired of lying, of pretending, of being afraid. She collapsed forward, burying her face in Javier's shoulder. The sobs came without sound, racking her body in violent shudders. She cried for the years she had lost, for the brother she had endangered, and for the man she was being forced to destroy. Javier froze for a moment, surprised by her sudden break. Then, awkwardly, he wrapped his arms around her. He patted her back, a rhythmic, comforting motion that reversed their roles. He was the protector now. "You deserve more than this." "Elle," he whispered, "you deserve better than this life. I just want you safe." She choked out. "I know," he said, "but if Luca still cares, if he is coming to the club to see you, maybe he is the only way out." "No," Elena gasped, wiping her eyes. "If I tell him, Victor kills you. That is the deal." Javier went silent, but his grip on her tightened. Elena pulled away, sniffing, and wiped her face with her sleeve. She needed to be strong. She needed to be the stone wall that kept the storm away from him. "I have to go back," she said, standing up on shaky legs. "I have to work." "Be careful," Javier said. "I love you. Javi." She turned and walked out of the apartment, past the guards who leered at her, and back into the city that wanted to swallow her whole. That night, the Inferno felt more like a cage than a club. The air was too hot, the lights too bright. Elena stood in the wings of the stage, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She adjusted her costume. Tonight. It was black lace and dark crimson, sharp angles and jagged edges. She did not feel seductive. She felt furious. When the music started, a heavy, driving beat that sounded like war drums. She stepped out. She saw him immediately. Luca. He was sitting in the same spot, front row, center. He was wearing a black suit, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, looking like a dark prince presiding over his court. He was not drinking. He was just watching her. Elena did not smile. She did not soften her eyes. She launched into the dance with a ferocity that startled the patrons in the front row. Her movements were sharp, precise, almost violent. She spun and kicked, her body snapping into poses that were defiant rather than inviting. She locked eyes with Luca. She wanted him to see the anger. She wanted him to see the trap. Every arch of her back, every stomp of her heel was a silent scream. Run, her body said. Run away from me. I am poison. I am death. She danced out her frustration, the agony of the choice Victor had forced upon her. She danced for Javier, locked in that tiny room. She danced for Luca, the man she loved and was ordered to kill. When the music reached its crescendo, she dropped to her knees at the edge of the stage, right in front of him, her chest heaving, sweat slicking her skin. She stared up at him, her chin lifted in a challenge. Luca did not look away. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were burning. He nodded, a barely perceptible dip of his chin. He understood. He saw the scream. Elena rose and fled the stage before the applause could start. 20 minutes later, she was sitting in the secluded booth in the back corner of the club. It was the furthest point from the platinum room, the only place she felt she could breathe. Luca slid into the booth across from her. He did not wait for an invitation this time, and he looked different tonight. The curiosity was gone, replaced by a granite-hard resolve. That was quite a performance, he said. His voice was low, cutting through the ambient noise of the club. I was inspired, Elena said, her voice tight. You were angry, Luca corrected. Elena looked down at her hands. I am tired, Luca, that is all. Stop it, Luca said. The command was sharp, like a whip crack. Elena's head snapped up. Excuse me, stop lying to me, Elena. I am done with the games. I am done with the half-truths. He leaned across the table, invading her space. His presence was overwhelming. I know about the hallway, he said. I know about the cameras. I know about the men Victor hired who are waiting behind the mirrors. Elena's blood ran cold. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking as brittle as porcelain. I do not know what you are talking about, she whispered. But the denial was weak, crumbling even as she spoke it. Do not insult my intelligence, Luca said, his voice dropping to a rumble. I know this is a trap. I have known since the first night. The only thing I do not know is why. Elena stared at him, her mouth opening and closing. He knew. He had known the whole time, and yet he was still here. Why are you doing this? Luca demanded, his eyes searching hers. Why are you working for a man like Victor Morello? You are not a killer. Elena, you never were. What does he have on you? Nothing, she insisted, but her voice broke. Is it money? Luca asked. Did you inherit a debt? I can pay it. Whatever the number is, I can write a check tonight and buy this whole damn club. It is not money, she cried out, and then she clamped her hand over her mouth. Tears, hot and traitorous, spilled over her lashes. She tried to turn away, to hide her face, but she couldn't. Luca's expression shattered, the anger vanished, replaced by a look of profound pain. Elena, he said softly. He reached across the table. His hand covered hers. She tried to pull away, to snatch her hand back, terrified that his touch would undo her completely. Let go, she gasped. No, Luca said firmly. He held on. He did not squeeze, he anchored. His thumb began to trace small, rhythmic circles over her knuckles. It was a grounding motion, steady and sure. It was a lifeline thrown into the middle of a storm. Tell me, he urged gently. Elena looked at his hand covering hers. It was so strong, so capable. It is my brother, she whispered, the truth finally bleeding out. Javier. Victor has him. Luca went very still. Javier, Victor says if I do not deliver you, if I do not lead you to that room, he will kill him. A sob escaped her, loud and ugly. She covered her face with her free hand, her shoulders shaking. Luca moved. He slid out of his side of the booth and moved to hers. He did not hesitate. He sat beside her, his thigh pressing against hers, and pulled her into him. Elena collapsed against his chest. She couldn't fight it anymore. She buried her face in the expensive wool of his jacket, inhaling the scent of him, and wept. "I am sorry." She sobbed against his shirt. "I am so sorry. Luca, I did not want it. I tried to make you leave." "Shh," Luca soothed. He wrapped a heavy arm around her shoulders, pulling her tight. His other hand came up to stroke her hair, his fingers moving in long, calming lines down her arm. I know you did." He held her while she fell apart. He sat in the middle of his enemy's stronghold, holding the woman who had been sent to kill him, and he felt nothing but a fierce, protective rage when the sobs finally subsided to sniffles. Elena pulled back slightly. She lifted her face to look at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her mascara smudged, but to Luca, she had never looked more beautiful. She looked real. Luca gazed down at her. The distance of 4 years evaporated. The anger, the suspicion, the hurt, it all burned away, leaving only the core truth that had survived the silence. He leaned in. Elena did not pull away. She leaned toward him, drawn by a gravity she could not resist. Their lips met. It was not a hungry kiss. It was not the desperate, frantic kiss of two people trying to forget the world. It was slow. It was searching. It was a question and an answer all at once. It was full of longing, a catalog of all the lonely nights and missed chances. Luca's lips were soft, warm, and impossibly tender. He kissed her like she was something precious, something he had thought lost forever. Elena's hand came up to grip his lapel, holding on as if he were the only solid thing in the universe. For a moment. Just a moment. There was no Victor, no Javier, no guns. Just Luca. They pulled apart slowly, their foreheads resting against each other, sharing the same breath. "You have to go," Elena whispered, her voice trembling. "You have to stay away. Luca, if you come back, Victor will kill you. And if he kills you, he kills Javier. I cannot save you both." Luca pulled back enough to look her in the eye. He reached up and brushed a stray tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I am not going anywhere," he said. "You do not understand," she pleaded. "It is a trap. I know it is a trap," Luca said, his voice steady and low, vibrating with a terrifying intensity. "But traps can be broken." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You cannot fight him here. He owns everything. He thinks he owns you." Luca said. "He's wrong." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Listen to me. Elena, I am going to get your brother back, and I am going to take Victor Morello apart, piece by piece." "How?" she asked, despair coloring her tone. From the inside, Luca promised, "Whatever trap you think you are setting, set it. Do exactly what he says." "What?" Elena stared at him in horror. "No, I cannot. Trust me," Luca said. He gripped her chin gently, forcing her to look at him. "Do you trust me?" Yes," she breathed. She did. God help her, she did. "Then play your part," Luca said, "and I will play mine. I never stopped loving you, Elena. And I will burn this city to ash before I let him hurt you or your brother again." He kissed her forehead, a seal on a vow. Then he stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the club. Elena sat there for a long time, her heart racing. His words terrified her. He was walking willingly into the fire, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a tiny spark of hope. Elena returned to the management office an hour later. Her legs felt unsteady. She had half a mind to confess everything to Victor, to tell him she couldn't do it, that she would take whatever punishment he had just to spare Luca. Victor was waiting for her. He was eating an apple, slicing pieces off with a small pocket knife. "You were with him a long time," Victor noted, not looking up. "We talked," Elena said, her voice hollow. "And he's close." Elena lied. "He's almost ready." Victor smirked. "Good. I want to see Javier," Elena said suddenly. "I need to know he is okay." Victor sighed, annoyed. He reached for a tablet on his desk and tapped the screen. He turned it around to face her. "Look," he said. Elena looked. It was a live video feed, but it wasn't the apartment anymore. It was a basement. Concrete walls, no windows. Javier was sitting on a cot in the corner, but he wasn't alone. There were 4 men in the room now, heavily armed, standing in the corners. They weren't just guarding him. They were preparing for a siege. "I moved him," Victor said casually, slicing another piece of apple. "Just in case you or your boyfriend got any heroic ideas, this location is strictly off the books. If you try to tell Carvelli anything, if you try to signal him, if you try to be clever, the order goes out, and that room becomes a tomb. Do you understand?" Elena stared at the screen. The image of her brother, so small and defenseless surrounded by those men, burned into her retinas. She realized then that Luca couldn't just storm in and save him. Victor held all the cards. If Luca attacked, Javier died. If Luca walked into the trap, Luca died. Despair threatened to crush her. But then she remembered Luca's voice in the booth. Traps can be broken. She looked at Victor, at his smug, arrogant face. She realized that pleading would not work. Running would not work. The only way to save them both was to stop being a victim. If Victor wanted a trap, she would give him one. But she would decide who got caught in it. "I understand," Elena said, her voice eerily calm. "Good," Victor said, clicking the tablet off. "Tomorrow night there is a gathering. Other bosses. I want it done then. An audience makes the statement louder. I will be ready," Elena said. She turned and walked out. Her hands were not shaking anymore. She had walked into the office a dancer, but she walked out a soldier. The war had begun, and she was done being the pawn. The ultimatum came with the morning tide, cold and inevitable. Victor Morello summoned Elena to the VIP balcony before the club even opened, overlooking the silent, empty dance floor that smelled of stale bleach and last night's spilled gin. He did not offer her a seat. He stood by the railing, looking down at his kingdom like a Caesar preparing for the games. "Tonight is the night," Victor announced, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself. "Tonight, I have invited friends," Victor said, turning to face her with a smile that showed too many teeth. "Bosses from the north, the triad lieutenants, even a representative from the sprawling cartels down south. They are coming to see a show. Elena, they are coming to see the end of the Carvelli Empire." He stepped closer, invading her personal space until she could smell the peppermint of his breath masking the rot beneath. "You will do exactly as we practiced. You will dance. You will bring him to the back, and when I give the signal, my men will enter the room. We will execute him live on the feed for everyone in the main room to see. It will be a lesson in power." Elena swallowed hard, her throat clicking dryly. "And Javier?" Victor reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch made her skin crawl. "Once Carvelli is dead, your brother goes free. You have my word." His word was worth less than the dust on the floor, but Elena nodded. She had no choice, or at least, that was what Victor believed. As soon as Victor dismissed her, Elena went straight to the employee locker room. She needed help. She needed a ghost in the machine. She found Mila stocking napkins in the storage closet behind the main bar. Mila was a bartender with sharp eyes, a sharper tongue, and a deep, abiding hatred for Victor Morello, who had treated her like furniture for 3 years. Elena pulled her into the narrow space between the shelves of vodka cases and closed the door. "I need you," Elena whispered, her hands gripping Mila's forearms. Mila looked at her, seeing the terror in her eyes. "Is it tonight?" "Yes, he's going to kill him. Mila, he's going to kill Luca. And if he does, he will kill me and Javier to tie up the loose ends." Mila's jaw tightened. She wiped her hands on her apron. "What do you need? The camera's in the back corridor," Elena said rapidly, her voice a hushed rush of words, "and the side exit near the kitchen. I need the feed cut at the exact moment we go in. And I need that door unlocked." Mila nodded, her mind already working through the logistics. The camera hub is in the breaker room. I can loosen the panel near the platinum room to kill the power to that specific sector if I time it right. But the exit? That is alarmed. Disable it, Elena pleaded. Please, Mila. Mila looked at her friend for a long second, then nodded firmly. I will short the sensor. But you have to get him out fast. If Victor realizes the feed is down, he will send the dogs. I know, Elena said, squeezing her arm. Thank you. Mila gave a grim smile. Do not thank me yet. Just make sure that when the shooting starts, you duck. Across the city, in the fortified silence of the Ember Room, Luca Carvelli received a phone call on a burner line that only 3 people possessed. He listened for 30 seconds, his face an unreadable mask of stone, and then ended the call. He looked up at Dante and the 4 other men gathered around the table. It is a show, Luca said quietly. Victor has invited an audience. Tonight, Dante swore softly. He wants to make an example of you. He wants to broadcast it. He wants a spectacle. Luca corrected. So we will give him one, but not the one he expects. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray skyline. The tip had confirmed what he already suspected. Victor was moving all his pieces into one square. It was arrogant, it was reckless, and it was exactly the mistake Luca had been waiting for. We stick to the plan? Dante asked, his hand resting on the heavy slide of his sidearm. We adapt the plan, Luca said, turning back to them. I walk in alone. Just me. No guards. No visible weapons. I want Victor to feel safe. I want him to drool over the prospect of an easy kill. And us? You will be the ghosts, Luca ordered. I want teams in the delivery bays. I want snipers on the adjacent rooftops covering the exits. And I want a breach team ready at the north wall. When the music stops, you come in. It is suicide. Boss, one of the lieutenants muttered, walking in there naked. I am not naked, Luca said, his eyes hard and cold as flint. I have the girl. She is the trap, Dante reminded him. No, Luca said softly, remembering the trembling warmth of her body against his, the desperation in her kiss. She is the key. The night descended on the city like a shroud. The inferno was vibrating with energy, more crowded and glittering than Elena had ever seen it. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, sweat, and anticipation. The VIP balconies were packed with men in sharp suits who watched the floor with the predatory gaze of sharks circling a reef. Elena stood in her dressing room, staring at the costume Victor had chosen for her. It was not a dress. It was a weapon designed to incapacitate. It was sheer mesh and strategically placed crystals, cutting high on her thighs and plunging low in the back. It left nothing to the imagination, exposing every line of her body, making her feel naked and vulnerable. She put it on, her hands shaking. She looked at herself in the mirror. She did not look like a victim. She looked like a siren. She applied her lipstick, a blood-red armor, and took a deep breath. Javier, she whispered to her reflection, for you. When she walked out toward the stage, she saw him. Luca was there. He was sitting at his usual table, front and center, an island of calm in the chaotic sea of the club. He was alone. He sat with a relaxed posture, one arm draped over the back of his chair, looking for all the world like a man without a care. But Elena knew better. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes scanned the room with the precision of a radar sweep. The music started. It was a heavy, driving beat, darker and more ominous than her usual set. Elena stepped into the spotlight. She danced. She let the music take her, let her body move through the rehearsed steps, but her mind was screaming. Every turn, every extension of her leg, every arch of her back felt like she was signing a death warrant. She spun toward the balcony where Victor stood. He was there, flanked by his guests, holding a glass of champagne. Elena locked eyes with him and dipped her head in a precise, submissive bow, a gesture of obedience that she knew would feed his ego. I am yours, the move said. I am doing as I am told. Victor smiled and raised his glass. He bought it. Elena turned, her body flowing like water, and faced Luca. She danced closer to the edge of the stage, her movements becoming sharper, more urgent. She caught his gaze and held it, slowly, deliberately. She brought her hand up to her throat. her fingers lingering there for a second too long. It was a universal sign of distress, of choking, of fear. "I'm afraid." The gesture screamed to him. "The noose is tight." Luca did not nod. He did not blink. But his eyes darkened. He saw it. He understood. Her heart raced, hammering against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack them. She was balancing on the razor's edge between two powerful men, between pretending and pleading, and one wrong step would send them all into the abyss. The music ended with a crashing crescendo. Elena froze in her final pose, chest heaving, sweat glistening on her skin like diamonds. The club erupted in applause, but she heard none of it. All she heard was the blood rushing in her ears. She walked off the stage, grabbed a silk robe, and wrapped it around herself. Though it did little to stop the shivering, she walked out to Luca's table. He stood as she approached. "It is time," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Luca looked at her. He looked at the terror in her eyes, the way her hands clutched the robe. "Lead the way," he said. Elena turned and walked toward the back of the club. The crowd parted for them. She could feel the eyes of the other bosses on them, heavy and judgmental. They were watching the lamb lead the lion to the slaughter. They reached the hallway that led to the VIP corridors. The noise of the club faded behind them, replaced by the hollow echo of their footsteps on the polished concrete. Elena walked slightly ahead, her heels clicking a rhythmic countdown. Every step took them closer to the room wired with cameras, closer to the men waiting with guns. Suddenly, she felt a hand on the small of her back. It was Luca. He didn't grab her. He didn't push her. He just rested his hand there, warm and steady. It was a touch of reassurance. "I am here," his hand said. "I know." The gesture nearly broke her. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. She wanted to turn around and scream at him to run, to save himself. But she couldn't. Javier. They reached the narrow section of the hallway. Just before the door to the platinum room, it was a blind spot, a small eddy in the river of danger. Elena stopped. She couldn't breathe. Luca stopped with her. He didn't ask why. Instead, he moved. He stepped in close, crowding her space. He placed his hands on the wall on either side of her head, caging her in. He didn't touch her, not yet. He just created a sanctuary with his body, blocking out the rest of the world. He lowered his head until his forehead rested against hers. She could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the clean scent of soap and danger. His breath was warm and steady on her face. "Elena," he whispered. She squeezed her eyes shut, a tear escaping to track through her makeup. "Look at me," he commanded softly. She opened her eyes. His face was inches away, his dark eyes searching hers with an intensity that burned. "Are you doing this of your own will?" he asked. The question hung in the air between them. It was the final exit ramp. He was giving her a choice, even now, at the gates of hell. Elena's lips trembled. She thought of Javier in the basement. She thought of Victor's smile. She thought of the love she had tried to kill for 4 years and failed. "My brother," she whispered. The words fragmented and broken. He has my brother. She didn't name Victor. She didn't have to. Luca's jaw tightened. The muscles in his neck corded with sudden tension. The realization washed over him. The desperation. The lies. The fear. It wasn't betrayal. It was coercion. She wasn't a traitor. She was a hostage. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since he walked into the club. "Okay," he said. He moved his hands from the wall to her face. He cupped her cheeks, his thumbs brushing away the tears that were now falling freely. His touch was fierce, possessive, and infinitely tender. "He is not going to hurt him," Luca vowed, his voice a low growl. "And he is not going to hurt you." He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't like the kiss in the booth. This was a war cry. It was desperate and searing. He kissed her like he was trying to breathe his own strength into her lungs. He kissed her with a promise of violence against anyone who dared to touch her. Elena grabbed the lapels of his jacket, clinging to him. She kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all her fear and hope into the contact. He pulled back, his eyes blazing. "Tonight," he whispered, his thumb stroking her cheekbones. "Tonight I take back control. For both of us." He stepped back, breaking the cage but leaving the protection. "Open the door," he said. Elena took a shuddering breath. She nodded. She turned to the heavy door of the platinum room and punched in the code. The lock clicked. The door swung open. They stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, just as Victor had arranged. A large round table sat in the center. Mirrors lined the walls. One-way glass hiding the hired guns. The air was still and cold. Elena moved instantly. She walked to the far wall near a decorative sconce. This was where Mila had told her to stand. Behind that section of the wall was the power junction. Mila had loosened the panel earlier in the day. It was the fail-safe. Luca walked to the table. He did not look at the mirrors. He did not look at the cameras that he knew were hidden in the crown molding. He moved with a relaxed, almost lazy grace. He pulled out the chair directly facing the main camera angle, the spot Victor had designated as the kill seat. He sat down. He unbuttoned his jacket. He leaned back, spreading his arms, exposing his chest. It was a posture of ultimate vulnerability. He looked straight into the camera lens, his eyes dark and mocking, waiting, high above the dance floor in the soundproofed control room. Victor Morello stood before a bank of monitors. The feed from the platinum room was crisp and clear in high definition. He saw Luca sit. He saw the arrogant sprawl of his limbs. Victor smiled. His heart was hammering with the thrill of total victory. The Allied bosses stood behind him, watching the screens, murmuring in approval. "He is seated," Victor announced. He reached out, his finger hovering over a large red button on the console. This button would signal the men behind the mirrors to burst out. It would signal the execution to begin. Victor looked at the screen one last time. He looked at Elena standing against the wall, looking small and terrified. He looked at Luca, who seemed to be staring right out of the monitor at him. "Say goodbye, Carvelli," Victor whispered. The tension in the room stretched thin. A rubber band pulled to its breaking point. The clock on the wall ticked. Victor's finger began to descend. The button clicked. It was a small sound, almost insignificant, but in the control room, it triggered an avalanche. On the monitors, Victor watched with a predator's grin as the doors behind the mirrors in the platinum room began to slide open. But in the hallway outside the room, chaos had already arrived. Mila, her hands slick with nervous sweat, jammed a screwdriver into the exposed wiring behind the panel Elena had marked. Sparks showered down like angry fireflies. There was a loud pop, and the lights in the back corridor died instantly. In the control room, the screens flickered violently and went black. "What?" Victor roared, slamming his fist onto the console. "Get it back! Get the feed back!" Inside the platinum room, the darkness was sudden and total. "Luca!" Elena screamed. She didn't think. She moved on pure instinct. She lunged away from the wall and threw herself at the chair where Luca was sitting. She grabbed his lapels and yanked him sideways with every ounce of strength she possessed. Luca, already moving as the lights failed, allowed her momentum to take him. They crashed to the floor together, a tangle of limbs and silk, just as the mirrors shattered outward. The room exploded with noise. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like strobe lights. Bullets tore through the space where Luca's chest had been a fraction of a second ago. The heavy oak table splintered, sending jagged shards of wood flying through the air. "Stay down!" Luca barked, covering Elena's body with his own. He rolled off her, moving with the fluid grace of a man who had lived his life in the crosshairs. His hand dipped into his jacket, and a sleek black handgun appeared as if by magic. He didn't fire blindly. He waited for the next muzzle flash, tracked the angle, and squeezed the trigger. 2 shots rang out, distinct and controlled against the spray of automatic fire. A man screamed and fell, his weapon clattering to the floor. "Move!" Luca yelled, grabbing Elena's wrist and dragging her behind an overturned heavy leather sofa. The sofa shuddered as bullets slammed into its back, puffing out clouds of stuffing and dust. Luca pressed a finger to his ear, activating the comms unit he had concealed there. "Now, go, go, go," he shouted. "Outside!" The night erupted. Luca's men, who had been waiting in the shadows of the delivery bays and the rooftops, stormed the rear entrance of the inferno. The heavy steel doors were breached with a dull boom that shook the building's foundation. Inside the club, the music cut out abruptly, replaced by the terrified screams of the patrons. The dance floor, moments ago a sea of revelry, transformed into a stampede. Glasses shattered, tables were overturned, and people scrambled over each other to reach the main exits. Back in the platinum room, the air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of cordite. Elena was shaking, huddled against the back of the sofa, her hands over her ears, but her eyes were open. She saw a gun slide across the floor. Kicked away by a falling guard, it spun and came to a rest near her foot. She looked at Luca. He was focused on the doorway, firing suppressing shots to keep the remaining attackers pinned down. "Luca!" she shouted over the din. He glanced at her. She kicked the gun hard, sending it skidding across the carpet toward him. "More are coming from the kitchen service tunnel," she yelled, pointing to a vent near the ceiling. "The vents! They can drop down." Luca nodded, grabbing the second weapon. He didn't question her. He trusted her. He tossed the second gun to his left hand. "Two guns, two directions. Cover your ears," he ordered. He fired upward, putting 3 rounds into the vent grate. A body crashed through the metal and hit the floor with a heavy thud, groaning. "We need to move," Luca said, grabbing her arm. "We are sitting ducks in here." They scrambled up, keeping low. Luca laid down a wall of fire, forcing the remaining guards to duck back behind the shattered mirror frames. He pushed Elena toward the door, shielding her with his body. They burst out into the darkened hallway. It was chaos. Luca's men were pushing forward from the rear entrance, engaging Victor's security team in close-quarters combat. The hallway was a strobe-lit nightmare of gunfire and shouting. "Elena!" A voice called out from the shadows. Mila appeared from a side door, wielding a heavy fire extinguisher like a club. She looked terrified but ferocious. "The exit!" Mila shouted. "I got the alarm!" "Not that way," Luca yelled, grabbing both women and pulling them toward the main bar. "Too many of them. We go through the front." They ran. They emerged into the main room, which was now a battlefield. The clubgoers had mostly fled, leaving behind a wreckage of shoes, purses, and broken glass. Luca's men were trading fire with Victor's guards across the dance floor. Luca pulled Elena and Mila behind the long marble bar. He crouched down, breathing hard, checking his ammunition. He turned to Elena. He gripped her shoulders, his fingers digging in. His eyes scanned her frantically, looking for blood, for tears, for holes. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his voice rough with panic. Elena shook her head, gasping for air. "No, I am fine. That is not my blood." She looked down at the smear of red on her arm. It belonged to the guard Luca had shot. Relief washed over Luca's face, so profound it looked painful. He closed his eyes for a second, resting his forehead against hers. "Thank God," he whispered. They stayed like that for half a heartbeat, breaths mingling in the chaos, an island of stillness in the middle of the war. Then Luca's eyes snapped open. He was back. "Stay here," he ordered. "Keep your heads down. Dante is securing the perimeter." He stood up and began firing over the bar, covering his men as they advanced, up in the control room. Victor watched his empire crumbling. The screens showed his men falling back, overwhelmed by the precision of Luca's assault. "He is not dead!" Victor screamed, sweeping the monitors off the desk. "He is not dead!" He grabbed his radio. "Grab the girl. If we have the girl, we can still bargain. Do not let her leave the building." On the floor, 2 of Victor's remaining guards heard the order. They saw Elena's silver dress behind the bar. They moved. Luca was occupied with 3 shooters near the entrance. He didn't see the 2 men flank the bar from the kitchen side. Elena did. She saw the shadow fall over her. She turned just as a hand reached out to grab her hair. "No!" she screamed. She didn't freeze. She grabbed a bottle of vodka from the shelf behind her and swung it with all her might. The glass shattered against the guard's face. He howled, clutching his bleeding nose, staggering back. The second guard lunged for her. Elena dropped to the floor and drove her knee upward, connecting solidly with his groin. He doubled over, gasping. Mila swung the fire extinguisher, catching the first guard in the ribs with a sickening crunch. But there was a third man. He came out of nowhere. grabbing Elena from behind, wrapping a thick arm around her throat. He jammed a pistol against her temple. "Drop it," he screamed. "Drop it or I paint the wall with her." Luca spun around. He froze. His gun was raised, leveled at the guard's head, but the shot was impossible. The man was using Elena as a human shield, her body completely covering his vital zones. Elena's eyes were wide, fixed on Luca. She wasn't struggling. She knew that if she moved, the gun would go off. "Let her go," Luca said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. It was the voice of death itself. "Back off," the guard shouted, retreating toward the dressing rooms, dragging Elena with him. "Back off or she dies." Luca lowered his weapon slowly. He held his hands out, palms open. "Okay," Luca said, taking a slow step forward. "Okay, you win. Just look at me. Look at me. Do not look at her. I said back off," the guard yelled, sweat pouring down his face. "You have a way out," Luca said, taking another step. "You walk away. You leave her, and you walk out the back door." "No one follows you, liar. I am a man of my word," Luca said. "Ask anyone. You leave her. You live. You pull that trigger. And my men will peel the skin from your bones before you die." The guard hesitated. His eyes darted to the exits. Behind him, Mila was moving. She had crawled along the floor, hidden by the debris. She picked up a heavy glass ashtray. "Hey!" Mila shouted. The guard flinched, turning his head a fraction of an inch toward the sound. It was enough. Luca lunged. He didn't shoot. He moved faster than thought, closing the distance in a blur. He grabbed the barrel of the gun and twisted it upward, away from Elena's head, just as it fired. The bullet shattered a light fixture above them. Luca drove his other fist into the guard's throat. The man gagged and collapsed, dropping Elena. Luca didn't look at the fallen man. He grabbed Elena and pulled her into his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her neck, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I have got you," he whispered fiercely into her hair. "I have got you. I have got you." Elena clung to him, her knees finally giving way. He held her up, his own heart hammering against hers like a war drum. "Boss!" Dante's voice cut through the moment. Luca looked up. Dante was standing by the control room stairs, his face grim. "Victor is gone," Dante reported. "The rat took the tunnel. And the boy?" Luca asked sharply. Dante shook his head. "The basement is empty. He took the kid with him." Elena let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. "Javier!" Luca held her face, forcing her to look at him. "We will find him. I promise you. We will find him." An hour later, the inferno was silent. The police were on their way, sirens wailing in the distance. But Luca's men held the perimeter. They were in a secure office in the back of the club, a room that had miraculously escaped the destruction. Elena sat on a leather chair, a blanket draped over her shoulders. Mila sat beside her, holding a glass of water with shaking hands. Luca paced the room. He was covered in dust and blood that wasn't his. He was still flooded with adrenaline, his mind racing through the possibilities. "Why?" Luca asked, stopping in front of Elena. "Why did you not tell me?" Elena looked up. Her eyes were dull, exhausted. "He has had him for weeks," she whispered. "Since the raid, he snatched him from his dorm. He sent me a photo of a finger, and said if I went to the police, the next one would be his head." She took a shuddering breath. "I did not have a choice. Luca, he told me to get close to you. He told me to make you trust me." Luca knelt in front of her. "So it was all a lie?" Elena looked at him, tears spilling over again. "No, that was the problem. The lie was that I didn't care. The truth was that being near you was the only time I felt safe." She reached out and touched his face, her fingers trembling. "Every time I touched you, I was terrified he would kill Javier. But every time I pulled away, I was terrified I would lose you." She dropped her hand. "He has him, Luca. He took him to a safe house. He showed me the video. He has men there, heavily armed." Luca didn't speak. He stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the flashing lights of the approaching police cruisers. He wasn't angry at her. The anger had evaporated the moment he saw the gun to her head. He was angry at himself. He had been so focused on the game, on the territory, on the pride of the Carvelli name, that he hadn't seen the desperate woman standing right in front of him. He turned back to her. He walked over and pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. He moved Javier because he knew his plan here was failing, Luca said, which means he is scared. He is running. He will kill him, Elena whispered. To spite us. No, Luca said firmly. He needs a bargaining chip. Javier is the only card he has left to play. As long as he has the boy, he thinks he can keep me at bay. He sat on the edge of the desk, leaning down until he was eye level with her. I am not going to blame you, Elena, he said softly. You did what you had to do to protect your family. I would have done the same. Elena looked at him, searching for any sign of deception. She saw only resolve. But now, Luca continued, his voice hardening into steel. We stopped playing by his rules. He reached out and took her hand. He pulled her gently from the chair until she was standing between his knees. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against him. He leaned his forehead against hers. We are going to get him back, he promised, his voice a low rumble in his chest. I am going to burn down every last piece of Victor's empire. I will tear this city apart brick by brick until I find your brother. Elena sobbed once, burying her face in his neck. Thank you. Do not thank me, Luca said, kissing the top of her head. Just stay with me. We finish this. Together. He looked over her shoulder at Dante, who was standing by the door. Get the car, Luca ordered, and get the boys. We have a hunt to finish. The war was not over. It had simply changed venues. The Ember Room was locked down, transformed from a gentleman's lounge into a command center. The air was thick with smoke and the murmur of grim men sharpening their knives for the final kill. Luca Carvelli stood at the head of the heavy oak table. He looked tired. The events of the last 24 hours had carved new lines into his face, but his eyes were clear, burning with a cold, blue fire. Victor is running, Dante said, tossing a map onto the table. He has gone to ground. We've checked his usual safe houses. Nothing. He has the boy, and he has vanished. He's not gone, Luca said. Oh, his voice a low rumble. He's wounded. And a wounded animal does not run forever. It finds a hole, and it waits to snap at anything that comes close. We flush him out, one of the lieutenants suggested. We tear the city apart. No. Luca shook his head. If we push him too hard, he panics. If he panics, Javier dies. We need to draw him out. We need to give him a target he cannot resist. I am the target, a voice said from the doorway. The room went silent. Elena stood there. She had washed the blood from her arms and changed into a simple black dress, but she still looked like she had walked through a hurricane. Her face was pale, but her chin was high. No, Luca said immediately. He will not come out for you. Luca, Elena said, walking to the table. She ignored the stares of the armed men. He's terrified of you. He saw what you did to his crew at the Inferno. He knows he cannot beat you in a straight fight. Then we find another way, Luca said, his fists clenching on the table. There is no other way, Elena insisted. She placed her hands on the wood, leaning in to look him in the eye. He needs to believe he still has the upper hand. He needs to believe that I am still his asset, that I am still under his control. He saw you leave with me, Luca argued. He saw you take me, Elena corrected. He does not know what we said in that room. He does not know about the jammed cameras. All he knows is that the feed cut. There was a firefight, and you dragged me out. We can spin this. We can send word that I escaped, that I am back at the Inferno, waiting for his orders. It is suicide, Dante muttered. It is a trap, Elena said, looking at the big enforcer. But this time, it is our trap. Luca stared at her. He hated it. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to lock her in a tower where Victor could never touch her again. But he looked at the map. He looked at the phone that hadn't rung. He knew she was right. Victor was holding Javier as a shield. The only way to lower the shield was to offer him a better sword. We use the Inferno, Luca said, the decision tasting like bile. It is already ruined. We make it look like we have abandoned it. We leave the security thin. We make it look like a vulnerability. And I will be there, Elena said, waiting. Luca looked at her for a long moment. He saw the fear in her eyes. She was terrified of Victor, but he saw the steel beneath it. She was doing this for her brother. She was doing this for them. "Okay," Luca whispered. "We finish it tonight." The preparations took hours. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the city in shades of bruised purple and charcoal, the plan was set. Luca retreated to his private office on the top floor. He needed a moment of silence before the noise began again. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city that sparkled below him like a sea of diamonds. It looked so peaceful from up here. It was hard to believe that down in the streets. Men were loading magazines and preparing to die. The door opened softly. He didn't turn around. He knew the sound of her footsteps. "You should not be in there," Luca said to the glass. "I am not going to hide while you fight for my family," Elena said. She came to stand beside him. She didn't touch him, not yet. She just stood close enough that he could feel her warmth radiating against his side. "I lost you once," Luca said quietly. His breath fogged the glass. 4 years ago. I woke up and you were gone. It broke something in me. Elena. A part of me went cold and never warmed up again until I walked into that club and saw you on stage." He turned to face her. His expression was raw, stripped of the armor he wore for his men. "I cannot survive losing you again," he confessed. Elena stepped into him. She rested her palms flat against his chest, feeling the steady, powerful rhythm of his heart beneath the crisp white shirt. It was beating fast, betraying his calm exterior. "You are not going to lose me," she promised, "and I am not going to lose you. We are going to walk out of that ruin together." Luca reached up and brushed a stray strand of dark hair from her face. His fingers lingered at her jaw, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. He looked at her as if he were trying to memorize her, cataloging every lash, every freckle, every nuance of her expression. He leaned down and kissed her. This was not the desperate kiss of the hallway, nor the tender kiss of the booth. This was deep. It was urgent. It was fueled by the terrifying knowledge that this might be their last night on Earth. His hands roamed over her back, pulling her closer, pressing her body against his until there was no space left between them. Her hands gripped his shoulders. Anchoring herself to him, the kiss tasted of fear and hope and a love that had survived silence and war. It was a promise made without words. They broke apart, breathless, but they didn't separate. They moved to the leather couch in the corner of the office. Luca sat, pulling her down with him, tucking her under his arm. She curled into his side, her head resting on his shoulder, his hand absently stroking her hair. "When this is over," Luca said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room, "I am done with the clubs. I am done with the territory disputes." "What will you do?" Elena asked, tracing the buttons of his shirt. "I have some property," he said. "Up north. By the water, it is quiet there. You can hear the ocean at night, not sirens. There is a house. It needs work, but the bones are good." "It sounds lonely," Elena murmured. "It would be," Luca agreed, "unless I had someone to share it with, someone who likes to read in the mornings and dance in the evenings." Elena smiled. "A small, fragile thing. And Javier? There is a guest house," Luca said. "He can go back to school. He can be whatever he wants to be. He can be safe. Safe." Elena repeated the word like a prayer. "No more guns. No more Victor. No more traps," Luca added. They sat there for a long time, whispering small, stolen hopes into the darkness. They built a future with their words, constructing a sanctuary where the violence of their world couldn't reach them. The intimacy of the conversation was as powerful as any physical touch, binding them together more tightly than any vow. Then, the phone on the desk buzzed. It was time. The inferno was a tomb. The police tape had been torn down, but the scars of the previous night remained. Tables were overturned. The mirrors were shattered. The air still smelled of smoke and stale alcohol. Luca's men were ghosts. They were hidden in the service corridors, in the ceiling vents, behind the bar, to the naked eye. The club was abandoned, save for a few lights left on near the stage. Elena stood backstage. She was wearing a simple black leotard and a long, sheer skirt. No sequins, no glitter. She looked like a mourning widow. She walked out onto the stage. There was no music. She began to dance in the silence. It was a haunting performance. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She spun, her skirt flaring out like a dark cloud. She reached toward the empty balcony, her movements pleading, searching. She was the siren calling the ship to the rocks. She fixed her eyes on the dark balcony where Victor had stood the night before. She willed him to appear. She willed him to take the bait. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Her muscles burned, but she didn't stop. Then she heard it. The sound of a metal door groaning open on the upper level. She stopped dancing. She stood in the center of the spotlight, breathing hard. Her eyes locked on the railing. Victor Morello stepped out of the shadows. He looked terrible. His suit was torn, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He was a man at the end of his rope, but he wasn't alone. He dragged Javier out with him. Javier's hands were bound, and there was a strip of duct tape over his mouth. Victor had a gun pressed firmly into the small of Javier's back. "Carvelli!" Victor screamed. His voice cracked, echoing pitifully in the large, empty room. "I know you are here. Come out!" Elena took a step forward. "Victor, let him go! Shut up!" Victor shouted, waving the gun dangerously before pressing it back against Javier. Javier flinched, his eyes wide with terror, locking onto his sister. "Come out, Luca!" Victor bellowed, "or I paint the stage with the boy's blood." Movement from the shadows near the bar. Luca stepped out. He was alone. He walked into the center of the ruined dance floor. He held a handgun in his right hand, visible, glinting in the dim light. "I am here." "Victor," Luca said. His voice was calm, almost bored. "Drop it," Victor shrieked. "Drop the gun." Luca stopped. He looked up at the balcony. He looked at Javier, then at Elena. "Let them go. Victor, this is between us. Drop it or he dies." Luca slowly opened his hand. The gun fell to the floor with a heavy clatter. He kicked it away. It slid across the parquet floor, spinning to a stop near the stage. "Happy?" Luca asked, spreading his hands. Victor laughed, a manic, jagged sound. "You think you are so smart. You think you can take everything from me? My club, my city? It is over, Victor," Luca said. "Just walk away." "No one walks away," Victor yelled. He grabbed Javier by the collar and shoved him toward the stairs. "Move!" They came down the metal staircase, Victor keeping Javier between himself and Luca at all times. He was using the boy as a human shield. Luca knew his snipers were watching. He knew Dante had a bead on Victor from the lighting rig, but they couldn't take the shot. Javier was too close. One twitch, and the bullet would go through the boy. Victor reached the bottom of the stairs. He pushed Javier toward Elena. "Get over there," he ordered. Javier stumbled toward his sister. Elena caught him, ripping the tape from his mouth. "Javier," she gasped. "I am okay," he whispered, shaking. Victor turned his gun on Luca. "Now," Victor said, his chest heaving. "Now you kneel." Luca didn't move. He stood tall, his eyes fixed on Victor. "I said kneel!" Victor screamed. "Come here, Elena!" Victor barked, gesturing with the gun. "Bring the boy. Stand next to your lover. I want to see you all die together." Elena froze. "Move!" Victor fired a shot into the floor near Elena's feet. Wood splinters flew. Elena grabbed Javier's arm and walked him toward Luca. They formed a tight triangle in the center of the room. Victor stood 10 feet away, the gun shaking in his hand. "This is beautiful," Victor sneered. "A family reunion." Elena looked at Luca. He was staring at Victor, but his hand hung loose by his side. He gave her the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. She knew what she had to do. She was standing slightly in front of Luca. She shifted her weight. Victor raised the gun, aiming for Luca's chest. "Say goodbye. Carvelli." Elena moved. She didn't run away. She stepped directly into the line of fire, shielding Luca with her body. "No." Victor yelled, hesitating for a fraction of a second. In that split second, Elena pivoted. She shoved Luca hard with both hands, pushing him sideways, and dropped to her knees, pulling Javier down with her. It was a chaotic, desperate move, but it created a window. For one heartbeat, Luca was clear. Luca didn't stumble. He went with the shove, spinning as he fell into a crouch. His hand went to his ankle. Victor fired. The bullet whizzed through the space where Luca's heart had been a second ago. Luca came up with the backup piece, a compact revolver from his ankle holster. He didn't aim, he pointed. At the same instant, the high window above the balcony shattered inward. Dante had the angle. 2 shots rang out as one. Victor jerked violently. A red flower bloomed on his chest and another on his shoulder. He staggered back, hitting the railing of the stairs. He looked down at the blood, confused. He tried to raise his gun again, firing wildly into the ceiling. Luca fired again, a precise, controlled shot. Victor collapsed. He slid down the railing and hit the floor. His gun skittered away into the darkness. Silence slammed into the room. Luca didn't lower his weapon. He walked toward Victor, kicking the man's gun far out of reach. He checked the body. Victor Morello was staring up at the ceiling lights, his eyes seeing nothing. It was over. Luca turned. Elena! She was on the floor, huddled over Javier. I am here, she called out. Luca rushed to them. He dropped to his knees, holstering his weapon. He pulled Elena into his arms. She was shaking violently, the adrenaline crash hitting her all at once. Are you hit? Luca asked, frantically checking her. No, I'm fine, she gasped. Javier, the boy sat up, pale and trembling, but unharmed. I'm okay, Elena, I'm okay. Luca pulled Javier into the embrace as well. The 3 of them knelt there on the ruined dance floor, a tangle of limbs and relief. Luca held them both, his arms like iron bands, anchoring them to the earth. He kissed Elena's hair, rocking her back and forth. You did it, he whispered. You brave, crazy woman. You did it. You saved us. She sobbed into his chest. We saved each other, Luca said. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity, but it was the work of creation, not destruction. Luca kept his word. He declared the war over. He dissolved Victor's remaining crew, offering them a choice: leave the city or work legitimate jobs. Most left. The Inferno was gutted. Luca didn't want the memories. He sold the building to a developer and bought a smaller, historic theater in the Arts District. 6 months later, the new club was called The Haven. It didn't have neon signs. It didn't have private rooms wired with cameras. It had velvet seats, acoustic paneling, and a stage built for art, not display. Tonight was opening night. The place was packed, but the crowd was different. They were there for the music. The band began to play a soft jazz melody. Elena stepped onto the stage. She wore a dress of pale blue silk. She moved with a lightness that she hadn't felt in years. She danced not because she had to, not to pay a debt, not to save a life. She danced because the music moved her. Her movements were soft, free, full of joy. She spun, her eyes scanning the front tables. Luca was there. He sat at a small table near the stage. He wasn't watching the exits. He wasn't checking for threats. He was watching her. His face was relaxed, the lines of tension smoothed away by months of peace. He held a glass of wine, his eyes following her every move with a look of pure, unadulterated adoration. He wasn't watching a trap. He was watching his future. Elena finished her set, bowing to the warm applause. She smiled, a real, radiant smile, and walked off the stage. She didn't go to a dressing room. She walked straight to the wings where Luca was waiting. He opened his arms, and she walked into them as if coming home. He folded her close, the backstage quiet and dim around them. He rested his forehead against hers. Closing his eyes, they breathed together, sharing the same air, the same peace. Ready to go home? He asked softly. To the water? She asked. To the water? Elena pulled back just enough to kiss him. It was a sweet, lingering kiss. Let's go, she said. They walked out the back door, hand in hand, leaving the darkness behind them forever. Thank you so much for listening to Mafia Boss Watched Her Dance in the Rivals Club, knowing every step was a trap set for him. I hope you enjoyed Luca and Elena's journey from danger to redemption. I would love to know where you're listening from. Please drop a comment below and tell me your country or city. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the Mafia Romance Stories channel for more emotional and thrilling tales. Don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts on the ending in the comments section. Your support means the world to me.